Hey, hi, hello. Welcome to Diana Emerson. Today, we are going to listen to Insane Twists. This is Genai Coleman.
On Friday, July 18th, 2008, shortly after 9 p.m., a single gunshot ripped through the bustling night near the Gwinnett Place Mall in Duluth, Georgia. A witness from the bus station across the street called 911 to report the shooting.
The lady just got shot. Is she breathing? Yeah, she's moving a little. Get everybody out of the way.
Paramedics and detectives from the Gwinnett County Sheriff's Office arrived at the scene and found an African-American woman lying on the ground with a single gunshot wound to the chest. She was stabilized and rushed to the hospital, where she later succumbed to her injuries. The victim was later identified as 40-year-old Genai Coleman. Investigators were left stumped with the lack of evidence at the scene. The investigation that followed was packed with twists that the detectives could never see coming. But was Genai murdered by someone she knew? And what could have been the reason behind it? Insane twist. The case of Genai Coleman. But before we delve any further, please take the time to show your support by subscribing to our channel, liking our videos, and clicking on that notification bell to receive the latest videos straight to your inbox. Without further delay, let's dive into another crime mystery. Duluth, Georgia is a small town with all the necessary big city amenities. Its 31,800 inhabitants get to enjoy a generous mix of modern living and outdoor activities. Named as the Tree City in 1989, Duluth is dedicated to maintaining its green spaces in an ever-expanding urban world. Its inexpensive cost of living attracts many families to its vibrant city. Its dense suburban feel also adds to the attraction. With the chance of falling victim to a violent crime being 1 in every 1,000 people, it's considered a fairly safe city to live as well. But it was here in 2008 that a horrific crime befell Genai Coleman. Genai Coleman was born to parents Geraldine and Robert Coleman on October 2, 1967, in Elkhart, Indiana. She was the third of 5 siblings and had 2 sisters named Rhonda and Camelia, and 2 brothers named Edwin and Vincent. She was raised in a family that prided themselves on honesty and love. Genai and her family were devout Christians who placed faith and family above all. Her parents eventually got divorced, but remained on friendly terms with each other. Apart from church, though, Genai saw serving her country as equally important. Once she turned 18, she enlisted with the military and served her country with honor. Once she completed her service, she returned home and dedicated herself to another passion, teaching. Her brother, Edwin Newsom, described her as being dedicated, passionate, and inspiring.
She was a phenomenal teacher. I was actually in her class a few years. Her ability was very awesome to see.
Genai's love for children extended beyond the classroom. She opened both her home and heart to 3 adopted daughters, Lakasha, Felicia, and Adriana. Together they lived in Duluth, Georgia. At just 40 years old, Genai had bigger goals ahead. She was awarded certification that allowed her to open her very own preschool. But these dreams were shattered by a single gunshot. The sound of a single gunshot rang out at a busy intersection in Duluth, Georgia, just after 9 p.m. on Friday, July 18th, 2008. Witnesses from the bus station across the road from the Gwinnett Place Mall watched as an African-American man pulled a woman from a car and dumped her on the ground before speeding off. One of the witnesses made a call to 911 as others tried to assist the woman.
We had Gwinnett Mall and the lady just got shot. Where at? Gwinnett Place Mall. Where her bus station is at. Is she breathing? Talking to her? Yeah, she's moving a little. Did you see where the person is dead? Yeah, he was in a car, but he pulled off. It was like a baby car.
She was still breathing, but barely conscious. Paramedics arrived at the scene first and stabilized the woman. Detectives followed soon after and cordoned off the crime scene. A quick search of the immediate area and the victim yielded no identification, and no one present at the scene recognized her. She was rushed to the Gwinnett Medical Center as investigators asked questions to those who witnessed the crime. From the bus driver, they learned that an African-American man had approached the woman who was seated in a gold-colored car. The bus driver said she watched as he placed his hand on the driver's door, leaned in, and began talking to the woman. She then heard a loud popping sound and watched as he pulled the victim from the car before dumping her on the pavement. He then drove off in her car. She provided detectives with one more vital detail. The man had been wearing a white t-shirt with green sleeves. Leading the investigation was Detective Damian Cruz from the Gwinnett County Police Department. As he walked around the scene looking for answers, he received some bad news. The victim had passed away during surgery.
She was pronounced dead about 10 minutes into the surgery.
The suspected carjacking scenario had turned into a homicide. They needed to work fast if they wanted to find the killer. Looking around the area, Detective Cruz was surprised by the brazen behavior of the shooter. It was a fairly busy area, particularly with the bus station nearby.
There's a mall maybe 300 feet away from there. There's a convenience store across the street. We're talking at a bus station, not just a stop.
He sent his team of detectives to speak with managers at the nearby restaurants and convenience stores to ask them if they noticed a quarrel between a man and woman. He believed the shooting may have occurred after a fight between the two, and that could explain the motive. All queries came back without any new leads. No one had noticed the man or woman before the shooting took place. 6 hours later, one of his questions was finally answered. While still at the crime scene, detectives received a report from the station. A woman named Camelia Coleman reported her sister Genai Coleman missing. She reported that her sister often waited near the Gwinnett Place Mall before going to pick up her eldest daughter from work. That night, however, she failed to pick up her daughter and hadn't returned home. She then went on to give a general description of Genai in the car she was driving. Detective Cruz knew immediately that Genai Coleman was their victim. Detective Cruz knew he needed to speak to Camelia face-to-face. He believed that speaking with her family might just bring them the answers they needed to solve the mystery of her murder. Detective Cruz paid Camelia a visit in the early morning hours of July 19, 2008. When the detective explained what had happened to Genai, Camelia shut down, unable to process the entire incident.
I just never thought that we would not grow old together. She was only 40 years old, and she was already gone. It was hard.
After some time, she was able to calm down enough to answer the detective's questions. It baffled Camelia as to why someone would shoot her sister. She explained to detectives that Genai had no enemies or bad blood with anyone in the city. For Detective Cruz and his team, the investigation simply got more and more complicated. The crime scene was already devoid of any evidence, and they had no idea where Genai's car was. The investigation team believed their best hope was to get hold of the car, and maybe evidence from there could lead them to the killer. Detective Cruz had already placed a trace on Genai's number plate, but nothing had come up. Just as he was about to lose all hope after questioning Camelia, he received some welcome news. Genai's gold Dodge Stratus was found 40 miles from the initial crime scene on July 19, 2008. An off-duty officer noticed the car parked in a dark shopping center. He then saw men walking away from the car and talking loudly on his cell phone. The officer told the man that he couldn't park in that spot. Distractedly, the man returned to the car and drove off. To the officer, the man's behavior seemed strange. It was what prompted him to run the license plate through the system and make the report.
His behavior seemed strange to the officer, so the officer ran the tag.
For Detective Cruz and his team, the officer's instincts had just paid off. Genai's car was again found just 2 miles away from where it was first located. It had been haphazardly parked, as if abandoned in a hurry. Now, Cruz hoped to find something of use in the car that could lead him towards the killer. The car was taken in for testing to the crime lab, and with help from the forensic team, they were able to find enough evidence to help solve the case. Well-preserved fingerprints were lifted from the exterior of the driver's side door. More fingerprints were found on the driver's door handle. Luck was on the side of the investigation team. In an act of providence, a cigarette butt was discovered inside the car under the driver's seat. In interviewing Genai's family, detectives came to learn that she never smoked or allowed anyone to smoke in her car. They therefore knew the cigarette butt belonged to the killer. It was now up to the forensics team to extract enough DNA from the butt in order to create a profile and find the killer. It turned out that there was more than enough to begin testing. But the investigation was about to hit a snag with a DNA profile. After running the profile through the national database of the Combined DNA Index System, they didn't get any initial hits.
When it was entered into CODIS, there was not an initial hit.
The fingerprints were then used and run through the database, but once again, there were no positive leads on who the prints belonged to. Investigators were not ready to give up just yet. They had one more avenue to explore. Detective Cruz was able to get hold of CCTV footage from the stores located near the crime scene and the area where the car was eventually discovered. The video footage was about to unveil a most unexpected piece of evidence. They had actual footage of their killer. The CCTV footage from within a convenience store near where Genai was parked revealed a man wearing a white shirt with green sleeves, khaki pants, and carrying a black bag. This was the same shirt the bus driver described the shooter as wearing that night. It showed the man walking into the store 2 hours prior to the shooting. He was seen buying 2 cans of beer. Most notably, though, was another piece of evidence from the store's camera footage. Detectives watched as the man bought a pack of cigarettes. They were able to hear him ask the store clerk for a pack of Bronson Light Longs, the very same brand of cigarette butt found in Genai's car. The cigarette butt with the DNA from her vehicle was a Bronson Light 100 Bronson Light Long. He was also caught on camera in the same area where Genai's car was abandoned.
Throw a
For
little
detectives,
lipstick on.
this was the ultimate evidence. They now had actual video of the man who had pulled the trigger and killed Genai with no remorse. Using this footage, investigators turned to the media and public for help in identifying the man caught on camera. A news special was broadcast throughout the Georgia area. The results were not what investigators expected. No one came forward with any tips regarding the man in the video footage. For once, investigators had everything they needed: fingerprints, DNA evidence, eyewitnesses, and actual video footage of the man they believed was responsible for Genai's murder. Without a name or new leads, the man in the video had become a phantom. Genai's case was quickly turning cold, but Detective Cruz was determined to solve the case for the victim, Genai, and her family. Just over a year after Genai's murder, the CODIS system came back with a positive hit. It was a welcome result, despite how long it had taken. The DNA belonged to a man named Donald Eugene Smith, a 51-year-old man with a lengthy criminal record. His most recent arrest in the early 2000s had been drug-related. Investigators realized it was certainly possible that he could be responsible for the carjacking and murder. Looking at his picture, they saw that he bore a striking resemblance to the man on the CCTV footage. Investigators visited Genai's family and told them the name of the man and showed them his picture. No one had heard of Donald Smith or met him. They also said that Genai never mentioned anyone by that name. Investigators now knew the shooting was a random act of violence. A further look into his files revealed a cell phone number. Investigators turned to the cell phone company and were able to subpoena the cell phone records for the number. A cross-reference of the activity of the cell phone in relation to the cell towers and the location of the shooting and where Genai's car were found showed high activity from the mobile number. They also noted that the number was used on a job application made by Donald years earlier. Speaking with the manager of the company, he also confirmed that Donald was the same man in the photo and the video footage. This, together with the DNA evidence and video footage, was more than enough for detectives to make the arrest. On February 3, 2010, Donald Smith was arrested at a homeless shelter in Georgia. Detective Cruz immediately notified Genai's family, who were relieved to hear the news.
We were relieved, very much relieved. It was the beginning of closure.
Investigators prepared to sit down with Donald and get the answers they needed. The case, though, was about to take a very strange and unexpected twist. Investigators questioned Donald extensively about his involvement in the shooting of Genai Coleman. He denied having ever met her or stealing her car.
Really, it's about this vehicle. I'm going to ask you questions. Have you ever seen this vehicle before or been in?
No, I have not.
Have you ever met this woman before?
But I haven't.
Investigators then pushed for an explanation as to how his DNA was found in Genai's car if he wasn't the person who shot her.
That vehicle you said you've never seen before, and the woman you've never seen before, okay? Your DNA ended up in that car.
That's interesting because my DNA couldn't have been in that car because I've never been in that car.
Donald was then shown video from the convenience store CCTV footage, to which he denied ever being there.
A picture basically on a computer. I want you to look at it. Let me know if you recognize the picture yourself or not, okay? This is your dad talking.
Oh, was it this guy right here?
Shane, that's your name.
That is definitely not me. I don't have a shirt like that. I can't see the face of the person. That's
He went on to say that it was hard to even recognize the face of the person. Donald also told police he did not own a shirt like that. When questioned about the phone number, Donald provided an explanation.
And then your cell phone number at the time was 404-200. Correct?
No, that was not mine. That was my brother's phone number.
Investigators were getting nowhere with the questioning as Donald continued to deny his involvement. He was asked by detectives to take a polygraph test to determine if he was being truthful with his answers. The test results did not favor Donald. The results showed that he was being deceptive with his answers. When asked if he'd known Genai Coleman, his answers showed some level of truth. But when asked if he recognized the person in the video, it showed deception.
In polygraph terms, he was being deceptive, and that's what they determined. There's certain important questions they asked. Do you know Genai Coleman? Did you shoot her? But they also asked, do you recognize the person on the video we've shown you? He failed it miserably.
Following the polygraph test, Donald seemed shaken according to investigators. He was allowed to take a cigarette break. Detective Cruz decided to follow him to the break area and took note of the cigarette brand he smoked. What he saw created doubt in his mind. Donald smoked a brand of cigarettes called Aqua Blues that required being hand-rolled. They were not Bronson Light longs. After the break, he returned to the room. Donald spoke calmly and explained a scientific theory that was about to blow the entire case wide open.
DNA is split between 10 twins. Since they share DNA, identical twins. I've never been in that car.
Donald had a twin brother named Ronald, who he identified as the man in the video. He told the police to ask his parents and sister about who they believed was in the actual video. Detective Cruz was afraid this might happen. After reading Donald's file, he knew that Donald was one half of a set of twins. He was also aware that identical twins shared DNA. Their entire case hinged on whether they arrested the right twin. It was a scramble to reevaluate everything they knew about the case. Just as the case seemed to be falling apart at the seams, investigators remembered they had a final piece of scientific evidence: fingerprints. Although DNA is similar in identical twins, fingerprints are never the same in any two people.
Identical twins may have the same DNA, but they do not have the same fingerprints. Nobody has the same fingerprint.
Investigators tried to make contact with Ronald Smith, but he initially refused to voluntarily go down to the station for questioning. Once again, they turned to the cell phone network provider to find their suspect. He was discovered to be hiding out in his family home. His parents and sister were unaware of the crime he committed in 2008. Upon the request of Donald, investigators showed his family the CCTV footage. All three agreed that the person was in fact Ronald and not Donald, based on his walk and style of dressing. Ronald was arrested on February 5, 2010, and taken to the station where he was questioned about Genai Coleman and the evening of the shooting. Donald, however, had not been released, as investigators did not want to take any chances in case they were playing a game. Several things had somehow started to paint a clearer picture. The cell phone used by Ronald was the very same used by the killer at both crime scenes. The cigarettes that Ronald smoked were the same found in Genai's car. And finally, the fingerprints found on the car were a perfect match to Ronald Smith.
Ronald Smith's print matches the print that was recovered from the car.
Now, all they needed was a confession. First, detectives began by presenting the evidence they had on Ronald.
This is it. After we conclude here in 2 minutes, we take it over to the county jail. The next time that you see Detective Cruz, he will present everything he has on the case, which is overwhelming. Right? Video, DNA, prints, phone records.
When that didn't work, they tried the emotional approach and asked him why he'd shot Genai Coleman.
This is the woman, okay? Her name was Genai. Okay? She had 3,000 children. She was a school teacher. Family, they're very religious people. They were more just wanted to know why. I promised them I would at least
Mm-mm.
ask. Okay.
Ronald became visibly upset and started to feel overwhelmed. He asked for Rafe.
This is like all of a sudden. I I'm going to say something. I use the bathroom. My one's what? Come back and talk.
He was left alone with Genai's photo in the interrogation room as detectives watched him from the other side at the one-way mirror. Detective Cruz said in interviews afterward that Ronald began to look at Genai's photo and apologize for what he'd done. After the break, detectives returned and turned the camera away from Ronald to ease the pressure on him. He then made a candid confession.
He was from the black. It was nasty. It was a hair trigger. I started to take a car. So I've done before when I was way younger. Check on it. I got a blonde. She said, you shot me. This is my auto revolver. It was 357. It was 5 shots. She thought I was something before I ended up with something. I took the car down to the forest park there.
No. You know, her family, this was something they really wanted to know as far as closure. Okay?
Tell it. Taking someone's life was not. And the things they did, it was no part of the picture. You can tell it was loose. Thank you. I know that was difficult for you. But I thank you.
Ronald was arrested for Genai Coleman's murder on February 6, 2010. He was detained at the Gwinnett County Jail without bond.
I mean, wow. What a relief it was that they finally caught him.
Investigators were able to gather more evidence of the confession when he made a call to a childhood friend from within the jail. On the call, which was recorded, Ronald told the childhood friend, among other things, that someone had died about a year and a half ago at his hands. Although the call could not be used as evidence, for investigators, it gave them hope that they finally caught their killer. His twin brother Donald was released and allowed to return to his family without any charges. With Ronald's confession, detectives and prosecutors had everything they needed to move forward with the case. They worked hard to prepare an airtight argument that would ensure Genai's killer went away for a very long time. Jury selection for the trial took place on Monday, October 22, 2012, with Ronald's trial beginning that same week. The family of both the victim, Genai, and the suspect, Ronald, were in attendance. The jury heard testimony from experts and the theories based on what investigators found at the crime scene and in the car. Donald, Ronald's twin brother, was also called to testify, and he explained the confusion caused by the evidence that led to his initial arrest for the crime. He then swore that he was not the person responsible for killing Genai Coleman. Ronald was about to add another twist to the case. He saw this as an opportunity to turn the case in his favor. Ronald reversed his confession and placed all the blame on his twin, Donald. He alleged that his brother committed the crime.
That was like the monkey wrench that was thrown into the whole case. How are they going to prove that one brother didn't do it over the other brother? What's going to happen, and how's this going to play out?
When experts explained that the fingerprints did not lie, Ronald said that his fingerprints were on the car because he helped wipe the car clean, but forgot to remove his prints from the driver's door. On Friday, October 26, 2012, the jury deliberated for 2 hours before returning to court with a decision. They found Ronald Smith guilty of carjacking and the murder of Genai Coleman. His brother, Donald Smith, was cleared of all suspicion. Ronald was sentenced to life plus 25 years in prison by Superior Court Judge Melody Snell Connor. To this day, he remains incarcerated at the Wheeler Correctional Facility in Alamo, Georgia. After the trial, Genai's family were able to find some closure after her tragic death at the hands of Ronald Smith. Her sister, Camelia Coleman, spoke to reporters after the sentencing and told them that the family's faith never waned as they knew the justice system would work. We prayed for a quick resolve and swift justice, and we've seen that happen, she said. Rather than focusing on hatred and revenge, Genai's family decided to honor her by fulfilling her lifelong dream. On July 13, 2015, the Genai Coleman Excellence Academy opened its doors to more than 100 children in Elkhart, Indiana, just days before the 7th anniversary of her death.